Luka Petrovic was a huntsman and miner in the remote hills of the Julian Alps in 1748. He prided himself on his endurance and fearlessness in the wilderness. But even he was uneasy about the caves that dotted the limestone mountains. The villagers whispered of a presence that haunted the labyrinth of tunnels, a creature called the Pecnik, a predator that fed on the lost and the daring. Luka dismissed these stories as folklore, stories told by the old women to keep children and the superstitious from straying too far into the unknown. One chilly autumn evening, Luka shot a deer and tracked it to the entrance of a cave he hadn't seen before. Against his better judgment, he followed the blood trail inside. At first, the passage was wide and straightforward, but it narrowed as he progressed, forcing him to crouch down. His torch illuminated the dark, damp walls. The air grew colder, and a faint, rotting smell made his stomach churn. Then Luka heard it. A sharp, clicking sound that reverberated against the rock. He froze, listening for the source, considering the deer he'd tracked. But something primal told him this was no deer. The hunter had become the hunted. As he turned to retreat, he tripped and lost his footing, sending his torch out of reach in the dampness. It sputtered with a hiss and died, plunging him into complete darkness. The clicking came again, and as his eyes adjusted, he saw the outline of something moving. It seemed humanoid, but grotesquely distorted. Its limbs were unnaturally long, its gait jerky, as if it were learning to walk anew. Luka backed away, but his foot caught on a rock, and again he fell. The creature pounced. Luka felt its breath as its clawed hands tore at him, its teeth ripping at his throat. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the cave. When a search party was sent to find him, the villagers never found his body. Only blood and the torch near the mouth of the cave. The entrance to the cave collapsed mysteriously not long after, sealing away whatever lurked within, at least for a time. I had always been fascinated by caves. It was like stepping into another world. So when my friend Hannah asked me to travel with her to Slovenia, a country renowned for its wild and uncharted caves, I couldn't resist. I had read about the caves tourists visited, but I wanted something more raw, more off the beaten path. A local guide mentioned a lesser-known cave in the forested hills of the Julian Alps. It had no official name, just whispers of Grobna Jama, or the burial cave. Locals stay away, he said, his tone uneasy. Superstition. It's a cursed place. I dismissed it as folklore and persuaded Hannah to hike in with me. She was always the cautious one, and as we reached the cave's mouth, its gaping maw almost hidden by thick moss and ferns, she immediately shook her head. Nope, absolutely not. I'll wait out here. Come on, it'll be quick, just to see how far it goes. No way. I'll be right here, alive, when you come out, she replied, folding her arms. Rolling my eyes, I clicked on my flashlight and stepped into the cool darkness. The air inside was damp, the faint sound of dripping water echoing like a heartbeat. At first it was thrilling. The cave was narrow but navigable, its walls streaked with mineral deposits shimmering under my flashlight. The deeper I went, the tighter it became, the air heavier. The entrance was out of sight now, and the only sound was my breath and the crunch of gravel underfoot. I was utterly alone, or so I thought. That's when I dropped my flashlight. It hit the ground with a clatter and spun in lazy circles, its beam flickering wildly, illuminating jagged walls and the deep shadows of the rock all around me. As I crouched to grab it, I heard it. A low, quiet clicking, the kind that doesn't belong in a cave or any natural place. I froze, my hands trembling as I reached for the flashlight. The sound seemed to be getting closer, like it was echolocating. With each second, it got closer, reverberating through the tight passage, and my heart pounded. "Hannah?" No answer. Just a deep, rumbling exhale, like something was breathing inches from my ear. I scrambled for the light, sweeping the beam wildly. "Hannah, cut it out. This isn't funny." A shuffle of movement behind me, in the direction of the entrance. My flashlight wavered, catching a fleeting glimpse of something hunched and pale retreating into the shadows. It wasn't Hannah. I pressed forward, hoping maybe there was another exit. I squeezed my body through passages that felt tighter and tighter. The air felt thicker in my lungs, stale and suffocating. Behind me, the clicking continued, getting closer in the darkness. It was stalking me. The clicking was so close now, louder, louder, followed by a screech that echoed through my skull. I whipped around, losing the grip on my flashlight as it smashed to the ground, rolling away, leaving me in almost total darkness. "Who's there?" I cried, reaching along the floor for the flashlight. Silence. And then I felt it. My hand landed on something cold and clammy. At first I thought it was just rock. It didn't move as my hands felt it. But it was flesh. In an instant my fingers brushed over a bald head, patchy with wiry hair, almost scaly. My hand slid down to a face. No nose, just rough, uneven bone. My fingers touched its lips, split and wet, but cold and breathless. As I sliced my finger on jagged teeth, it let out another deafening shriek. I screamed, pulling back as it lunged towards me and into the dim light. For a split second, I saw the thing fully, humanoid, emaciated, its skin mottled and gray, its hollow eye sockets oozed darkness, and its clawed fingers reached for me with unnatural speed. I ran. The cave seemed to close in around me, the walls tighter and tighter, and the air thinner. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away. Behind me the creature followed, its clicking and screeches bouncing off the stone. It was playing with me. I could feel it. It could have caught me at any moment, but it let me run, stumbling, scraping my skin against the walls. My chest was burning and my legs were weak, so weak that I tripped. I felt the cold stone rush up to meet me, and heard my head cracking against it. The world spun, the screeches fading into blackness. When I woke, I was outside, surrounded by emergency personnel speaking rapid Slovenian. My head was throbbing and my clothes were torn and damp with blood. Hannah knelt beside me, pale and frantic. "I thought you were dead. You were gone for hours." I looked around, confused. "What do you mean, hours?" The sun was setting now, and the forest was already dark. "What happened?" I croaked. Hannah explained that after waiting and hearing nothing, she'd had the good sense to flag down another hiker, an older man who immediately blanched when she described where I'd gone. "Grobna Jama," he had whispered, crossing himself. "Cursed. The Pecnik lives there. It feeds on the lost." They called for help, and after hours of searching, I had been found just inside the entrance behind some rocks, unconscious, my face pale and bloodied. But the rescuers said they didn't find anyone or anything else. But I remembered what I'd touched, what I'd seen. Had it been real? Was it a hallucination brought on by panic and lack of oxygen? Once I was back in the U.S., I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd experienced. I had nightmares of it calling to me, whispering for me to come back to that cave. Rationally, I wanted to believe it had been a hallucination, a stress-induced nightmare brought on by claustrophobia. But something about the Pecnik stuck with me. I began researching obsessively, piecing together its legend. The Pecnik, or dweller, was an ancient Slavic myth, its origins dating back to before recorded history. It was said to be the spirit of a cursed soul. The creature was doomed to haunt caves, luring the curious and the greedy to their deaths. Accounts of the Pecnik described it as humanoid but distorted, with elongated limbs and a face that seemed half-formed. Its skin was mottled and leathery, and its eyes, if they existed, were sunken pits. It thrived on fear, toying with its victims in the dark before striking. The creature is a predator, but a cunning one. It doesn't attack immediately. Instead, it stalks its prey, clicking in the darkness, or mimicking loved ones' voices, or screeching to paralyze its victims with fear. It feeds on the terror of the lost, savoring their desperation before delivering the final blow. The Pecnik is said to guard caves it deems sacred, punishing those who venture too far into its territory. It despises light, which is why torches and lanterns often flicker out when it approaches. 2 stories stood out in my research. The disappearance of Luka Petrovic, 1748. A miner and hunter from a nearby village, Luka Petrovic was believed to have been hunting near a cave system in the Julian Alps. According to the villagers, Luka was a capable hunter, so must have been stalking something when he entered the cave. They never found his body, only his torch, and a large trail of blood leading into an impossibly narrow crevice. Villagers believe the Pecnik had claimed Luka for trespassing too deep into its domain. That cave was abandoned and is now known locally as Lukina Smrt, Luka's death. In 1912, a British team of explorers set out to chart the unmarked caves of the Julian Alps. Among them was famed geologist Dr. Henry Wycliffe, known for his skepticism of folklore and superstition. Dr. Wycliffe's journal, recovered from the cave entrance months later, detailed their journey. In one entry, he wrote about hearing strange noises, clicks and whispers, but that the team had dismissed these as echoes. On the 4th day, the journal became more erratic. Something watches us. The light won't hold. It grows closer. The others laugh, but I see it in the shadows. It has no eyes, but it sees everything. The last entry, scrawled in frantic handwriting, read, "We are not alone. It comes for us, the keeper of the dark." None of the team was ever found, and their disappearance remains a mystery. Local rumors claim the Pecnik lured them deeper, feeding on their fear until they were too weak to escape. A team of 8 Slovenian miners lost 6 men while excavating a cave, again in the Julian Alps. The 2 remaining survivors spoke of a shadow that moved on its own, and a deafening screech that drove them to abandon the dig. When rescue teams entered, they found only bloodstains and torn clothing. The 6 other men were never found. A tourist from Bosnia stumbled into a cave and was later found wandering the forest, incoherent and babbling. He claimed a thing in the dark had followed him. The hiker's fingernails were shredded, and his body was covered in scratches. He disappeared weeks later. Modern interpretations suggest the Pecnik symbolized humanity's fear of the unknown and the dangers of hubris. but the consistent details across centuries, its appearance, the clicking and the screeching, these were all too specific. The more I read, the more I realized what I'd experienced wasn't imagined. It was real. I had touched it, felt its breath, and heard its screech. The creature wasn't just a legend, it was waiting, whispering to me in my dreams from deep in the earth. The more I researched, the more obsessed I became, and then I found another piece of the puzzle. The Kargely mines of Russia, far from Slovenia, were already famed for their Bronze Age significance. Vast networks of tunnels where ancient civilizations extracted copper fueled the rapid technological advancement of the time. Archaeologists had long known the site as a hub of industrious labor and trade, but a recent excavation uncovered something much darker beneath the surface. Burial remains were found deep within the sealed-off sections of the mines. What made them peculiar wasn't just their location. It was their posture. The skeletons were curled tightly into fetal positions, hidden in alcoves and crevices as if attempting to escape something. Some clutched small, crudely fashioned talismans made of bone and copper, etched with ancient, unidentifiable symbols. Even more disturbing were the tunnels themselves. Entire sections of the mine had been deliberately backfilled with massive volumes of rubble, not haphazardly abandoned, but methodically sealed, as if the miners weren't simply abandoning their work, but desperately trying to entomb something beneath the earth. The remains themselves told a chilling story of their own. Carbon dating placed them around 2000 BCE, but the state of the bones suggested violent trauma. Many bore marks of deep gashes, and others seemed gnawed, as though by large teeth, but no one knew of a predator that could fit in the narrow confines of the mine shafts. The remains of tools and personal effects were left behind as if their owners had fled in haste or been dragged from their stations mid-task. As archaeologists dug further, they began to notice peculiar carvings in the walls. These weren't decorative or functional. They seemed more like warnings, images depicting a humanoid figure with grotesque proportions, distorted limbs, elongated claws, and a gaping mouth. In some carvings, the figure was shown emerging from below the earth, clutching miners in its arms. One image was particularly haunting. A group of figures arranged in a semicircle, hands raised as if warding off the creature. Beneath them, a series of etched symbols seemed to mimic the talismans found with the skeletons. These weren't just miners. They were desperate people performing some kind of ritual to protect themselves from that thing below. Local folklore about the Pecnik extended even to Kargely, its reach stretching over millennia. Oral traditions told of a creature that haunted the ancient mines, a spirit of greed, punishment, and hunger. The Pecnik, they believed, was born from the very copper they sought, a guardian of the earth's veins that punished those who dared strip its bounty. Two haunting examples of the Pecnik's presence in Kargely folklore were recorded. The Song of the Sealed Mine was a tale passed down in local communities, which spoke of a group of miners who unearthed a shaft filled with strange bones. The men, dismissing warnings from an elder about disturbing the ancient spirits, continued their work. That night, screams were heard from the depths, followed by the mine's sudden collapse. Rescuers who reopened the shaft found no bodies, only bloodstains smeared on the walls. The mine was abandoned, sealed with rubble, and left as a grim warning. Then there was the last prayer of Makar. A clay tablet discovered near one of the sealed-off tunnels bore an inscription in an ancient script. The translation described a miner named Makar, who prayed to the gods to bind the shadow that stalked him in the dark. He begged for protection, leaving offerings of copper and flesh. The tablet was found near a skeletal hand gripping a small dagger, as if Makar had tried to fight whatever had come for him. My hands shook when I first saw the Kargali images, the curled skeletons, the wall carvings, the ancient talismans. Each piece felt like confirmation of what I had tried to tell myself was just a nightmare, a hallucination brought on by fear and darkness in that cave. But no, it was all real. I couldn't stop. I printed every article, ordered books on Bronze Age mining practices, and pored over the translations of these old Slavic myths. The drawings from Kargali, etched into stone over 3,000 years ago, were exactly what I remembered. The spindly limbs, the gaping, grotesque face, the hollow sockets where eyes should have been. The miners who sealed those tunnels weren't protecting the copper. They were protecting themselves from it. The Pecnik wasn't just some story passed around at a campfire. It wasn't just a Slovenian or Russian legend. It was part of something far older, far darker, and more extensive than I could have imagined. And yet, despite the fear that still gripped me when I closed my eyes, despite the memories of its breath on my skin and the terrifying moment of my fingers brushing its face, I couldn't stop thinking about going back. I didn't tell Hannah, of course. She would never understand. I couldn't even explain it to myself, not fully. But there was this pull, a deep, gnawing curiosity that wouldn't let go of me. What if I had imagined it? What if I hadn't? What if I could find it again and capture proof this time? A photo, a video, something that would make the world listen. They'd have to believe me. The thought of standing face to face with the Pecnik again filled me with dread, but also a strange electric thrill. If I could capture it, if I could bring back proof, I'd be famous. I'd be more than famous. I'd go down in history as the person who uncovered one of the most terrifying creatures ever known. It wasn't just about fame, though. It was about certainty. About standing in that cave and knowing that it wasn't a dream, that it wasn't my imagination running wild. It was real, and I had survived it. Maybe that's what drove the miners in Kargali, too. Greed, the same arrogance, the same desire to conquer what should have been left alone. I stared at the printouts of the sealed tunnels in Kargali, the skeletal remains curled in terror, the talismans clutched in their bony hands. I traced the outline of the carvings with my finger, memorizing every jagged line, every detail of the Pecnik's twisted form. I made my decision that night. I would go back. Not to Slovenia, though. Not yet. I needed to be smart about this. I'd go to Kargali first, to see the place where this creature had terrified people thousands of years ago. I'd study the ruins, find the seals they'd used, understand the rituals they'd performed. And then, when I was ready, when I had the tools and the knowledge, I'd go back to that cave. I'd find the Pecnik again. They had hidden from it, buried their fear in sealed tunnels and talismans, but they didn't own it. They cowered while I would stand. I wouldn't just find the Pecnik. I'd make it part of my legacy. This time, I wouldn't run or black out. I wouldn't leave without proof. As I packed my things that night, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. My heart raced as I zipped my bag, the same way those miners must have felt entering those caves for copper. They wanted riches, and I wanted glory. I wasn't just going back for answers. I was going back to claim my place in history. I was going to be famous. If the Pecnik was the guardian of the Earth's depths, then I would be the one to bring it into the light. If it was still out there, this ancient, horrifying thing, it belonged to me now. The Pecnik would be mine to claim, no matter the cost. After all, I could hear it calling to me night after night in my dreams. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more weekly stories. If there are topics you'd like me to cover or stories you'd like to submit for me to read, please leave a comment and send them to my email address in the description. If you'd like to support my work, please give me a like, comment, and definitely share these stories with your friends. It really helps. You can also do some shopping at the Lady Grimm store. There's a link here as a QR code and in the description. Thanks again, and see you next week.